Welcome to the Simply CMT Podcast, presented by the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Association. This is a new monthly podcast highlighting the CMT community and the work of CMTA. I'm Chris Cosentino, and for our second episode, we're joined by CMTA's Youth Programs Manager and Director of Camp Footprint, Jonah Berger. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Nice to be here.
So before we jump into your role at CMTA, I want to know more about Jonah. The positivity that you bring every day is just so inspiring. I want to know that origin story. When did you first learn about CMT?
Let's see. Well, I was diagnosed at age 5. My mother has CMT, and she was diagnosed right before I was born. I believe my sister, who's 3 years older, was already in the world, and my mom had always been a little clumsy. They always just called her clumsy. And then there was one day she talks about where she was at the beach and she was crossing the street and she tripped, and she remembers feeling in that moment like there was nothing I tripped over. I just tripped because I tripped over my own foot, and it was intrinsic enough a feeling that she went in to a neurologist and was diagnosed then with CMT, and that kind of started a domino effect of going back up the family tree or back down the family tree to get the older generation diagnosed with something they didn't realize they actually had. And then by the time I came along a couple years later, my mom had a solid enough grip on it that they were advising her, you don't need to test him right away. So at 5, I was diagnosed with CMT. And then over the coming years, I remember little monuments of my path. Like my parents sat me down one time and tried in their best way to explain to a 6-year-old what CMT is and what nerves are and what myelin sheath is. And I remember being at the table and my dad drew a human body and was trying to explain to me how the brain connects with the muscles through the nerves. And I did not get any of it, but I remember the conversation and I remember feeling like, okay, can I go back and play now? And then over the next chunk of years, I really didn't start seeing symptoms in my day-to-day life until I was closer to 12, just before 13, where I definitely noticed, a little bit of weakness in my hands, but the majority of the initial symptomology was my feet and stumbling more and weakness, and my legs got really tired at the end of an average day. And I remember my mom coming and putting a pillow under my feet many, many nights of my youth just to kind of give my feet and legs a rest. And that kind of led me down the road of every year I got older and wiser and more able to absorb. I think my mom kind of met that progression with more and more knowledge and more information. And as I got into my mid-teens, that's when I really started just paying attention to my mom. If I were to kind of summate my attitude towards life with CMT, it all reverts back to my mother and the way she handled this pretty solid challenge with absolute beauty and grace and never let it stop her. And she had rough days, but she never, ever stopped. And she never, ever let it get her into a negative place for a long period of time. And that's absolutely where it comes from me.
Now, you talked about the physical challenges that CMT presents. What about emotionally, mentally? What kind of toll has that played in your life?
It depends on the age that you're asking about. I talk about in early on in the book, I wrote about CMT that we'll get into later. I talk about the first page of the book is recollecting a time in the 6th grade when I was in gym class and we were playing softball, and I got up to bat and I hit a ball over the second baseman's head. And I remember thinking, wow, for me, that was a pretty good shot. And I started running towards first base, and it was the first time that I could tell that something was wrong, that I wasn't just slow or less athletic, that something was actually different about my physiological makeup. And I got thrown out at first base, where most other people probably would have made it to first. And that was our third out, and our team went out to play the field, and I went out and I was shortstop. I'll never forget it. I got out to shortstop. put my hands on my knees, was leaning over, waiting for the first batter to come up. And that was the first emotional hit that I feel like I took of, wow, this is going to put me in a different category. I'm not going to be afforded the ability to be normal. And that is a pretty profound thing for a sixth grader to have to digest. And so, every chunk of years, you come into a different level of maturity and a different level of growing emotionally. And every one of those stages, be it making friends with other people, be it getting into starting to think girls were interesting in my vision, and CMT playing a role in every single stage, reminding you, whether you wanted that reminder or not, that you were different, that you didn't get to be like everyone else, which unfortunately is the goal of every young person, most young people in the world, is to fit in, to be just like everyone else. And CMT, looking back on it, it's a blessing, but never allowed me to be normal. And I think that has led me to be an adult who not only is abnormal, but enjoys being abnormal, because you can fight it your whole life, but then you're fighting your whole life, or you can just go with it and make it yours. And that's kind of the attitude I've taken.
No, it's incredible. And obviously, hey, you're someone, living with CMT, and you have this opportunity to play such a big role at CMTA. Walk us through that. Walk us how you first got involved in CMTA, and eventually becoming, the youth programs manager.
So that was kind of an evolution. It all starts and very much continued over the years and through present day with Gina Sweeney. She wasn't brand new, but she was in the big picture relatively new to the CMTA scene. And I'll never forget, I went to a conference in DC, and my cousin and I met Gina. And like many people tend to say after they meet Gina for the first time, they were a bit changed after they first got to talk to her. And she had so much life and enthusiasm and like positivity around it that I felt like it was kind of this natural kinship. And the more I got to know her, and then Elizabeth Ouellette, who was very big in the board and in getting the CMTA off the ground, they were both just so positive and so full of life around the battle with CMT that I wanted more of that. It was like knowing when you've come across people who are akin to your view of the world and your perspective, you want to stay as close to those people as you possibly can. And Gina was it for me. And so I slowly but surely started doing more and more one-off projects with youth in mind, some videos that we put out there. I led a youth outing from one of our national conferences. And then that led to them deciding that I was going to be a part of every conference, every year's summit, and we used to call it the conference. And I would go every year to wherever it was. Back then, it was more twice a year. And while the adults were listening to the neurologists talk about science and neurology all day, I would take the youth who were in attendance at all the conferences out. And it was mostly just to get the kids out and have fun. And then very quickly after that, we came to realize that when the youth had a chance to sit down, like we would always do an activity that was fun, but then we would go out to lunch. And it was lunch where the magic really started happening, that you could tell these kids organically were starting to talk to each other about things that were so much deeper than the average kid talks to another kid about. And I think organically, again, by nature of it being something that so desperately needed to be gotten off their chest, but they barely ever had kids around them to do that with, when we created that table where kids who were dealing with CMT could come together. And again, a kid would go to shake the Parmesan cheese, and the shaker, getting a grip on it was hard for them. And two other kids at the table would be like, dude, I know what I do is I hold it with two hands and I shake it with two hands. And it was like, then it was off to the races. Every time we did another one after that, I would come with these questions ready. What's the hardest thing about having CMT as a kid? What is the best thing about having CMT as a kid? What do you wish your friends knew, or what do you wish your friends didn't do? around your CMT, and it would start conversations that would just go on and on. So that was kind of the next chapter, is just multiple conferences a year. And then that eventually led to the idea of camp. And Pat Livney, the CEO at the time, had always talked about wanting to do camp, called me one day and said, "What do you think of being the director of the first camp for kids with CMT?" And I think I said yes before he finished the sentence, because I grew up in camp. My father was a camp director my entire life, and I am my father's son, no doubt about it. And so between my passion for camp and my understanding, obviously, of life with CMT, I was in, man. And we went about creating it the first year. I think about 10 minutes after the campers arrived, we knew something special was going on. This Camp Footprint is the 8th camp that I've been a part of, either planning or directing. And I've never been a part of a camp that is this special ever. And that's saying something, because camp is special no matter what. But to take kids who are used to being the different one and the other one and the outsider, and give them just a chance to feel what it's like to not be different, to give them a chance to feel normal. And I've always said it the same way. I don't put a lot of value in normalcy. I think normalcy is boring. The really interesting people in life are the abnormal ones. But for kids who have had to be the abnormal one their entire lives, to give them 1 week to not have to be that and just to let them be a kid is the honor of my lifetime to be a part of. And then after a couple years of camp, I went and pitched to the CMTA, "Why don't you hire me full time and let's build a youth movement?" Because the kids, several kids, Erin Black, I'll never forget, amazing young woman who was a kid at the time, came to me and said, "I don't feel like the youth have a voice at the CMTA, and that's something we should fix." And I couldn't have agreed with her more. And there were so many kids that were so impressive, just intelligent, wise youth, that I knew if they gave us the space to create something, we could create something magical that didn't have to start and finish at camp. And to the credit of the powers that be, it was Amy Gray at that time was the CEO. She took the jump and hired me on full time, and I'm in my 5th year full time now with the CMTA as the National Youth Programs Manager, and we are heading towards year number 10 of Camp Footprint this summer.
Yeah, we talk about Camp Footprint, and this year we're going to be celebrating 10 incredible years of CMTA's Camp Footprint. For those that don't know, summarize camp, and the impact that it has on the campers, the counselors, and really everyone involved.
So I would say from the top down, I'm not a big believer in up and down. So from one end of the spectrum across horizontally to the other, everyone who's involved in Camp Footprint is moved by Camp Footprint. I always tell the same story that the first year of camp, I came out one morning, the first full day of camp. So our first morning we actually spent at camp, and I had my braces in one hand and my shoes in the other, like I do every day. I get up, grab my braces and shoes, go find a place to sit down, and start my 5-minute process of getting my legs strapped on to me. And I came out, I sat down on the couch, and I was starting to put on one of my braces. When I went to start putting on the other brace, I looked down the couch from me, and there were 2 little boys sitting on the couch who were putting their braces on in their morning routine. And I have never, in that moment, I realized that was the first day I ever had company putting my braces on. And I looked down the row and I smiled at the kids, and the kids smiled at me. And I was like, that's what this is all about. It doesn't matter if you're a kid, a counselor, or the camp director. Everyone has the chance to be seen, understood, and heard without them having to even say a word. And that, I feel like, allows the kids and the adults who deal with this every day to relax into themselves and be their most authentic selves in a way that they don't even realize they're not doing back in their lives. You grow up, again, kids want to be like everyone else. And if you're not, your first instinct, unfortunately, oftentimes is to cover that up, is to hide those pieces. And so I feel like kids with CMT, and therefore older kids like me with CMT, tend to have a lifetime of hiding their truest self before they even realize they're doing it. And camp just kind of sets you free of that. And so there's a lightness about CMT at Camp Footprint. There is a celebration of CMT at Camp Footprint because kids are having so much fun and being themselves and being accepted for who they truly are that, I mean, it's heaven on earth. There's no understatement to that. It is heaven on earth. And I was lucky that Gina was by my side every step of the way, and we've kind of co-directed camp from the very beginning. And as a result of her participation, she brings out in me a heightened level of Jonah, and I think I do the same for her. And it's like Turbo Jonah and Turbo Gina pouring everything 150% into camp and into the kids and the staff. And as a result, they feel like kings and queens, like they are, and they have the time of their lives. And over the years, we've seen that 1 week at camp not only changes how kids see themselves and their path with CMT, but changes their future, because now we've got kids who talk about, oh, I'm on a text chain with 7 other kids from camp, and we talk every day, all year round. That's it. That's the reason we do what we do. And I have never in my entire life worked with a better staff. The caliber of young adults and adults that come to be counselors and staff and program staff at our camp are the absolute finest kind, as evidenced by the fact that not only do they not get paid because we sink every cent we have into the actual program, they are oftentimes paying for their travel to get to camp for the opportunity to volunteer for us for a week. And not only do they not complain about that, they willingly do it. They start GoFundMe pages to raise money to be able to afford taking a week off and getting across the country to be a part of this thing. That's how magical it is that when something this, in an age where, in a culture that we're in right now that is so mixed with good things and just terrible things, there's something unbelievably powerful and drawing about even 1 week in the ideal, in a place where everyone has their priorities well in line and treats each other the way that we all should be treating each other all the time, but unfortunately don't. And as a result, we have amazing counselors, the greatest kids on the planet that hold a wisdom most adults can't understand. And I used to love to do things on my own because I have a clear vision on how I want programs to go. Gina, much less the entire team who helped to plan Camp Footprint, are so good that I've opened my heart and mind and arms to this collaborative effort. And as a result, the end product is 10 times better than it would be if I was doing it by myself. So long-winded answer, but I could talk all day long about how amazing this program really is.
Yeah, CMTA hosts 2 camps, Camp Footprint West in June out in Oregon and Camp Footprint East in August in Pennsylvania. But it started with just one. How has camp evolved from the first camp to year 10?
Pretty much straight up. We started, I'm going to estimate, don't quote me, but we started with 36 campers total. That was the first year in 2016. I think the second year it was 61. I think the third year it was 79. We just kept growing and growing. And then I think in our 5th year, we were at 112. And it got a little too big. And we realized that we wanted to cap it at what we determined was kind of that sweet spot, which would be 80 campers at a time. And so between that and hearing over the years that one camp in Pennsylvania, you're kind of ignoring the West Coast, and the West Coast families have to fly all across the country, it was evident that the next step would be to introduce the idea of a West footprint. And I was super nervous about it because, creating something special is one thing, replicating it and duplicating it is quite another. And I should have known better because the strength of the foundation of what Footprint is built on is something that just can't fail. It just can't fail. We've got the best of the best. planning and running it and hiring for it and recruiting for it. And therefore, everyone involved is so solid that we made the jump in 2023. So this coming summer, 2025, will be our third year of having 2 camps. And in 2023, we had 80 campers in the East. We had 61 campers in the West, and it couldn't have gone better. It was just an amazing experience. Had a noticeably different feeling than the East. The East is East. It's got more of an energy, more of an East Coast flavor. And it's held in Pennsylvania. The West definitely has a little bit more of a mellow vibe to it, and an easygoing vibe to it. They are both undeniably footprint. You get the same energy and quality and experience of program in both. But then last year in 2024, we had 80 campers in the East and 71 campers in the West. So we went up by 10, and we are well on our way to... We're almost full in the East, and we've got a handful of spots left in the West still. And if things go well and the way we're hoping, we're going to fill both camps this summer in the third year of having 2 of them. So pretty wonderful.
You mentioned your father earlier, and you talk about him quite a bit at Camp Footprint. Discuss your father's role in your life and how his experience as a camp director inspired you to build Camp Footprint.
How much time do you have? My dad, was not a perfect man. God knows. Like, he and I butt heads with the best of them for many, many, many years. We lost him about a year and a half ago. But while he was on this earth, he affected more kids and families than anyone I've ever known. We counted at his funeral. We were literally doing the math, and we came up with a rough number that between teaching middle and high school for 54 years and directing camps for 55 years. And he was the youth director of our temple for 38 years, somewhere around the neighborhood of 25,000 kids, 25,000 families this man affected. And I've been in youth and childcare my entire career. I've seen so many amazing professionals. None of them come close to my dad. He was just the whisperer. He got kids. He was completely in touch with the kid inside, no matter what age he was. He was, if a baby was brought over by a relative or a friend and put on our floor, my dad would be on the floor, like making sounds and faces at them. There wasn't a behavior he hadn't seen 1,000 times over. There wasn't a challenge he couldn't face. And he did it with so much care. I mean, that really is, if there's one thing I'm most proud to have taken from his lead, it's that the way to make a program successful is to have relationships. Gina, God, if I had a penny for every time Gina has said everything in business is about relationships, I'd be a rich man, because she says it all the time and she's right. My dad didn't get a lot of time with Gina, but they would have gotten along really, really well. They're cut from the same cloth, and because they both understood what I now understand as a result of my father, that connecting with people will lead to them populating your programs, will lead to them donating to your programs, will lead to them spreading the word about your organization and programs. And so my dad would hire amazing counselors, treat them like absolute gold, was never able to pay them as much as he wanted to, but they kept coming back. So I went to his camp when I was a kid for 12 years, and there was a group of counselors, 30, 40 strong, who were there for the majority of that 12 years because they never left. They wanted so badly to continue to get another dose of the magic that my dad gave out like candy from his pocket. So I grew up watching my father both during the year at Temple and Hebrew School, and he did a retreat program. Then every summer I was in camp with him and I got to watch him. I would go and sit in his classrooms over the years. I grew up seeing arguably the best of the best at it. And I stole every single molecule I could from his lead. And I am by no way perfect, but what I am is someone who is devoted to connecting with people, because I think everything else that you need for a program, for an organization, for a mission, it all falls under the umbrella of make good connections with people. Show people that you really care about them, that you really hear them, and they will work tirelessly for you. And it's such a simple equation that most leaders don't really understand. And any program that I'm a part of, I'm going to work my butt off to make sure that I spread that message as loud as I possibly can from the hilltop, because that's how we do it. It's about community and how much better we are together than we are on our own. And my dad understood that on such an intrinsic level, and I was just really, really blessed to grow up in the shadow of that.
So Camp Footprint registration is filling up very quick.
Yeah.
What can folks do to support Camp Footprint, to keep it growing, and continue to make it such an incredible experience for everyone involved?
I hate to sound cliche, but donation is everything. The CMTA is working to do two very large things, which is to cure CMT or find treatments for CMT, and then also to care for the community and support the community and unite the community while we all wait for that day of a cure. And, those things just can't happen without money, is the bottom line. For the first 9 years of this camp, and at least going into the next few years, are hoping to maintain this, we have provided Camp Footprint free of charge for the families. The only financial burden that the families have is travel, is to get their kids to camp. When they get to camp, they don't spend a cent. And we figured out that cost per camper, when you factor all the expenses the CMTA covers for camp, it's close to $2,500. That is no small thing. We are working to establish some additional help than we already provide for the counselors to get to camp, and to honor them for their time. We have a lot of counselors who do 2 weeks with us and take 2 weeks of their PTO, which for some of them is more than they get in a year. The campers that can't afford travel, we have a fund set up to support them and to help them get to camp, so that money is never going to be the deciding factor on whether a kid can participate or not. And again, back to the origins of that all stems from money. And as little as I like to see money as the main priority, I have seen the amazing things that this organization and that this program of camp can do if we have the funds to get it done. We've got the recipe. We just need the money to buy the goods. And so if you're hearing this and interested in supporting camp, and in helping this amazing magical experience continue, donate to the CMTA, CMTAUSA.org. Donate. Specify that you want your donation to support Camp Footprint, and trust that we will do just that and continue to increase the joy that we bring to these kids every year, and God willing, continue to increase the number of programs that we're able to offer them. In addition, if you are young at heart and energized enough and want to be an actual part of camp, apply. Same thing. You go on to CMTAUSA.org and look up Camp Footprint, and there's a place to register to be a counselor. And we've got counselors who are 19 years old, and we have counselors who are 63 years old. And so if it's something you would like to be a part of or be considered to be a part of, please feel free to apply. I give you a call, we do an interview, and see if it's a good fit to have you come and be a part of the actual production of camp.
We'll be right back.
This 2025, we invite you to join us and walk or cycle for CMT. Fill the community with hope and promise by supporting the 1 in 2,500 people living with CMT. Walk for CMT and Cycle for CMT are annual community-based nationwide fundraising events for the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Association that have continued for more than a decade. These community events bring together the CMT community to raise awareness about Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease and to generate funds for research and patient programs. Patients across the country join in solidarity to walk, roll, or to support the cause, helping to make a significant difference in the lives of those who are affected by CMT. There are 3 ways to participate in these events. You can either host a walk or cycle in your local area, join an existing event, or ask a friend or loved one to walk or cycle in your honor. For more information, please visit cmtausa.org/4CMT. That's the number 4 CMT. And now, back to the show.
Now, another incredible program that you oversee is CMTA's Compass Young Adult Program. That's for those living with CMT that are at least 19 years old. Explain Compass and why it's such a great fit for those interested in joining.
So Compass grew out of this kind of bigger vision of the longer we have, I grew up with a CMTA that was very adult focused and have been extremely fortunate to play a role in helping to develop and to run the youth program with a ton of support and cohort. But then over time, once the more solid that camp became and the more solid that the youth movement became, we started seeing that there were still gaps in the equation of the ultimate goal of trying to support someone from birth until death in their journey with CMT. And I think we do an amazing job, better than anyone in the business, at supporting adults in so many different ways. We now do an amazing job at supporting the youth in so many amazing ways. The next kind of evolution of that is the youth movement, for example, covers kids ages 10 to 18. And so kids would be done with the youth movement at 18 and then go into so-called adult branch of the CMTA. And it felt like there were too many age ranges in that one category of adult. And so we put our heads together and decided to come up with the Compass program, which would serve young adults ages 19 to 30. We're a little more loose on the 30 end of that, because again, as witnessed by myself, there are plenty of adults out there with strong and proud immaturity and connect to different ages, but mostly 19 to 30-year-olds, so that the youth who had come into the youth movement and then graduated from it would have a next evolution to go. And then the thought is by the time they're 30, they're enough of full-blown adults that they, more organically and effectively could become part of the CMTA adult community. And to say it took off like a rocket is an understatement. We launched it in 2022. We put the word out far and wide, and man, they came flocking in. And within months, we had a few hundred participants, and we kind of couldn't keep up with it. It was unbelievable just how hungry these people were to connect with people their own age, in their own age range at least, because as I think most of us would agree, there are certain things for the most of us, there's always exemptions, but for most of us, there are certain things that are happening during different chronology of your age path that are specific to that age range, such as college, applying for college, keeping accessibility in mind as you're looking at colleges or interviewing colleges. Do they have a support network for students with disabilities? Do they have a disabilities office at their college, which most colleges now thankfully do? Dating, serious relationship dating, which tends to really kick in as you enter into your 20s. Quite honestly, sexuality and CMT, you name it. Everything that any average human being goes through gets compounded challenge-wise by CMT. And we've learned that if we build it, they will come. They flock to be able to connect with other people who are going through similar things. And that is why I believe that Compass has really taken off in a way that putting them directly into the bigger adult community may not, because the bigger adult community was really populated with older adults and in a beautiful way. But as soon as we gave an opportunity, a branch of this support tree, geared specifically not just to young adults by age, but to young adults by what they were going through during that age range, man, they were just so excited about it. And we didn't have to plan a bunch of flashy programs. We didn't have to invest a ton of material into it. It was mostly just give them a way to connect, get them connected, and they take it from there. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and we are just over 400 people on the database for Compass. We are next week going to Kansas City for our first leadership retreat, where 14 amazing young adults are going to come together and map out the next year, much less next few years with us. They are old enough to be ready to really make an impact, not just on the community, but on fundraising. They are the future of the CMTA. They are going to be the ones leading it when we are too old to do so. And so to invest in them seems like such a wise decision, and has really encouraged me and us at the CMTA to keep that momentum going. We've got a youth movement that's amazing. We've got a Compass movement that's amazing. We're now working on developing a program for below 10-year-olds, and not connecting the kids, actually, obviously, but connecting the families of 0 to 9-year-olds so that the parents can have fellowship in a higher level than they already do. And yeah, I am incredibly proud to be a part of that work and to be a part of the team that is prioritizing keeping that work going, and don't plan to stop anytime soon.
Now, you're also an author. Talk about your book, Walks Like a Cowboy, and how folks can purchase it.
Yep, I've written 2 books, actually. The first one is He Walks Like a Cowboy. Came out in 2007 or 8. And basically, the other book is not CMT specific. It's called The Kindness of Strangers. And that's just a collection of stories from my life that I find prove that something bigger is going on. It's the magic of life in book form. But my first book, He Walks Like a Cowboy, was really all about charting the journey of little kid through adult, and showing how CMT impacts you. It's helping to chart not just how you face that challenge, but describing the challenges themselves, but also describing the mental path that you go through to meet those challenges. Nothing in the life of CMT is easy, but you have to face it. I've done 2 triathlons in my life. I've climbed the tallest mountain in Colorado in my life. I've ridden in RAGBRAI, which is an annual bike ride across the state of Iowa, where you bike 75 to 80 miles a day for a week with about 11,000 other bikers. And I came in last place in every single one of those things I just described to you. Last place, literally last place. And it never bothered me, because all I cared about was accomplishing things that, by nature of having a disability, most folks would say I shouldn't have even been trying. And that was enough of a challenge to me to want to step up and do that. And so after I learned those lessons and how valuable they were to me, that to teach myself that I actually could be the determining factor of what I can and cannot do in this life, not CMT. CMT will be a part of everything I do, like it or not, but I get to be the one that has the final say in if I can do something and if I can't. And when I learned that, I wanted everyone under the sun to know it, because I think it's the most important lesson that you can possibly learn. I do public speaking across the country, not just to groups with CMT, but to many, many groups and many, many schools with kids, because I think it's a lesson that we need to be hammering home to every human being that will listen, is that you don't have control over the challenges that come your way. You have full control over how you're going to embrace those challenges. You can choose to have those challenges run you over, or you can choose to say, okay, here's a challenge. What am I going to do about it? And writing this book, He Walks Like a Cowboy, was all about getting all those lessons that I had learned down on paper for my own benefit, much less now to be able to put a book in the hand of anyone who I met over the years. When I would start dating someone, I could give them a copy of the book and they could understand my journey in a way that would take me weeks to describe. I've put that book in the hands of countless strangers who are dealing with CMT or who are new to the world of CMT, and help them to understand you're not only going to be okay, you're going to be great. It's just going to look really different than how you thought it was. And it's been really, really well received over the years, which has been just such a joy. I didn't have any understanding of how many books would sell. It probably hasn't sold a ton, but from all the CMTA events that I've been a part of, for all the speaking engagements that I do across the country, I've been able to put that book in several thousand people's hands. And I love every bit of that. It's available on Amazon. Both of my books are He Walks Like a Cowboy by Jonah Berger. I believe it's like $12, and I make a solid, I think it's somewhere along the lines of $3.12 for every book sold. So if you want to invest in the future Hawaii fund of the Berger family and get some inspiration in the process, feel free to get yourself a copy.
Yeah, and this year we produced a new short film series that's going to be featured on CMTA's YouTube channel, highlighting members of the CMT community. The first film focuses on you and your life with CMT. What was that experience like, and why is storytelling so important?
Oh man, it was a really great experience. You know, the guy who we found to do the filming was just such an amazing guy and brought so much perspective and experience to the table. And I don't know, I've always felt like a storyteller. That's just part of who I am. I think culturally, growing up in a very quintessential Jewish family, we told stories all the time. As a little kid, I would listen to my grandparents tell stories for hours on end. My dad was a great storyteller. When you work with kids, you need to learn how to tell stories and how to put life lessons or things you want the kids to do into more palatable form. And all of us, if you're lucky, grew up on books and kids' books and stories that brought lessons with them. And so I have always intrinsically found that the best way to translate what's in my mind and what I've learned from my life with these challenges is through story. It's just the most universal way to help almost anyone understand what you're talking about. When I give a keynote address at a conference, for example, I don't get up and talk for an hour about the science behind CMT. I get up and I talk about how I felt when I laid in the dirt at the camp dance when I was in love with Jody Brown and she saw me trip and fall in my nicest clothes and face down in the dirt as a very young, impressionable 15-year-old. That helps people to understand the actual experience of CMT, not just the science on paper of CMT. And so it was a thrill and an honor to be a part of that experience and be able to get some of those stories down and shared in a way that will get to far more people than I could reach on my own 2 feet. So I think it was really awesome. And I love initiatives like this that, you know, the CMTA is helping not just the CMT community, but the greater community to understand why it is so important to cure this thing, why it is so important to be united while we wait for the cure of this thing, is that there are so many lessons to be learned from it. And there are thousands of Jonah Bergers out there who every day go through these challenges and could easily tell you amazing stories that would inspire you and enlighten you and move you to action, or at the very least to treat other people with a higher level of respect. And so not only am I excited about my episode, but I can't wait to see future episodes of other people's, because I love hearing people's stories and I adore telling my own.
And that's a wrap on episode 2. Jonah Berger, thank you so much for joining us on the Simply CMT podcast presented by the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Association, and we appreciate all that you do for the CMT community.
My pleasure, Chris. Good being with you, man.